Good evening, everybody. This feels a little bit like being thrust out on centre stage with the spotlight on you without having necessarily learnt your lines or had much of a rehearsal. We've been fumbling around backstage with a certain Mr. Kieran Bracken, dominating a huge amount of rehearsal time with tech inefficiencies. You would think after a year of doing nothing but Zoom calls, we'd all be up to speed by now. But no, not necessarily a World Cup winner able to get himself from A to B. But they are both here. Not only Kieran Bracken, but also the legend that is Mr. Paul Wallace. And we'll introduce both of those two in just a moment or two. Very, very familiar to all Saracens fans, of course, and fans of England and Ireland, and Lions fans as well. So lots to talk about this evening. Good evening, everybody, though. It's lovely to have you with us. My name is Alex Payne, and it's a pleasure to be your host of the fourth NBN webinar in the NBN Digital at Home series. It's going to be very relaxed over the next hour or so. We've got a sidebar for you to drop some comments and some questions into. We've also had lots of you pre-submitting them as well. So thank you very much indeed to everyone who's been getting involved. And obviously it's the penultimate round of the Guinness Six Nations on Saturday. A big game in Paris, obviously, with France and Wales going head-to-head probably to decide the championship. We've obviously got Scotland taking on Italy. Okay, but lots of talk tonight about Ireland against England, which we're very much looking forward to on Saturday. And apologies for the doorbell, which is going bananas. That is my son returning home from school. Best laid plans for that. Fingers crossed someone else will get it. However, tonight is obviously a free webinar for those of you I know who've signed up and joined us. So thank you for that. What we would love to do throughout the course of this, though, is just to remind you that there is a bigger cause that everyone, we are hoping tonight will get behind, and that is the Digital Divide campaign. I hope you've heard of it. If you haven't, just allow me to have a couple of minutes on the Digital Divide campaign, which has been set up by the Saracens Foundation. It's been spearheaded by a certain Maro Itoje, so that hopefully will get you sitting up straight and concentrating. And tonight we'd like to raise awareness and also encourage you to donate to what is a brilliant cause. You can do the donations in two different ways. Obviously money, which talks, but also if you've got any old laptops, phones, tablet devices which are sitting in a box rusting or gathering dust, we would love to engage you to perhaps submit those to this cause. So the reason that the Digital Divide campaign has been set up is that during lockdown, there's been a huge spotlight thrown on a number of social inequalities, and we'll all be very familiar with a lot of those. But most recently, a lot of awareness has been being driven around the digital divide, which means that those young children and young people who are having to learn from home and don't have access to online lessons and resources, they need technology in order to be able to keep up. Those that don't, and there's an estimated, would you believe it, 1.8 million students who don't have access to these sort of devices. What happens to those children is that they fall behind up to a 6-month period in every year compared to those who have devices. What that then means is that without access to devices and falling behind by 6 months, their GCSE grades drop significantly. That then means that their chances in life are severely affected. Statistically, it leaves them more likely to be unemployed or to commit criminal activity in later life. So you can just see how not having a computer can have an enormous effect in later life. As schools start to reopen, there is a huge demand for these devices, which is where we are hoping you will come in tonight. We need these kids to have the tools that they need in order to be able to achieve the exam results that they have the potential to deliver. So the Saracens Foundation is going to be delivering unused and professionally wiped laptops and tablets to children and young people across North London and in Hertfordshire schools. And therefore, we would love you to help either by donating money to the Saracens Foundation or these unused devices which have been wiped and cleared of all private and sensitive information and therefore would be serviceable and usable. Please click on the link that is posted in the comments as well as in the YouTube bio to see how you can A, find out a bit more about it, and B, hopefully get involved and commit to the cause as well. Hopefully tonight will be a lot of fun. And if you enjoy it, we'd love you to perhaps repay that by getting involved in what is a really worthwhile and worthy cause. Apologies, I've got all sorts of things going ping and bing, but that is the nature of the beast in 2021. Right, without further ado, let's bring in our dream duo. I say let's bring in the duo. Hopefully they're both still on the line. We had one or two connection problems a little bit earlier on, but they don't need a great deal of introduction, certainly to Saracens fans. Ladies and gentlemen, a World Cup winner in 2003, a Saracens legend, a British and Irish Lions tourist as well, Mr. Kieran Bracken, and the man that Martin Johnson called the player of the series in 1997, certainly the greatest tourist I've ever had the privilege of travelling alongside, a Saracens legend in his own right, and a barrel load of star appearances for Ireland as well, Mr. Paul Wallace. Good evening, gents. Kieran, give us a tune. Are you with us?
There you go. Absolutely. You've been boring us for a few minutes.
Well, I have to go through T's and C's. Now it's over to you.
Can I just check, by the way, is that a real background? Because you look like quite posh with that background, or is that one of those screensavers or something? Paul Wallace is in his bedroom. I'm in someone else's house, but you're in the West Wing. It looks like. Is that right?
Well, you'd be disappointed if I was in a shed out back, wouldn't you? I'm trying to maintain standards here and make up for you two. Wally, where are you at the moment? You're looking very sort of, it's clear and quite sort of feng shui.
Well, I'm very anxious. Bracken actually knew it was my bedroom, so he figured that out. In Monkstown in Dublin, which is a nice sunny day over here. I think the weather will be the same for the weekend as well. So it should be a bit of a difference from last weekend when we played the Scots.
Yeah. Well, we could do it. We could all do with some sunshine. We're looking a little bit pasty. Kieran, how are you? How's lockdown been? How have you managed the last 12 months?
Well, I got COVID in December. I caught it from my oldest, Charlie. I caught it, and I wasn't too bad actually with it. Just a bit of a hangover. It reminded me of my days with Paul Wallace on a night out. It was a bit like that the next day. It didn't really affect me too much. Didn't really have long COVID. But yeah, it's been a really weird year, hasn't it? I mean, it's so weird, and it's funny because my brother lives in Ireland, and you're just looking at how Ireland and England have coped with COVID. And I was just wondering if Paul needs us to send over any vaccines, for sale. Paul, if you need any.
We will. Do you know what? If the rumours of the Lions series going ahead in the UK, and you'll all get your vaccines over there, and we won't be able to fly over to watch any of the tests. I have no problems about summer holidays, but if you're to miss a few tests in England, Scotland, Wales, that would be pretty disappointing. You're getting the vaccination rollout done pretty well, Kieran. Send a few in.
Do you think? I was hoping for some side effects. If there's any side effects, no one said that your hair will grow back, so that's been a disappointment. So I know there's blood clots and things like that. I shouldn't joke, but you've aged well, actually, haven't you, Paul? Look at you. I mean, you put your head in lots of places in the scrums and the rucks and stuff, and you've come out all right, haven't you? I mean, maybe you didn't tackle as many as you should, but you're looking all right, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, I suppose all things are comparable, really, Kieran. I suppose when you're looking at yourself, but the nose took a bit of a battering. That still hasn't looked after itself. Holding on to the hair though, just as well, and it's still real.
Significant amount of Botox as well, Wall, isn't there? Aren't you doing quite a lot of that at the moment to make yourself look good?
It's amazing with bars and nightclubs. It rejuvenates the spirit, all right. That's the early nights, and that's certainly helping. And having time to go out and do a bit of training and clean living and all that is all good.
Good on you. And you've obviously got young twins, Wally, which I know is keeping you very busy. Kieran, how's the homeschooling been? Have you managed to keep the peace, or has it been educational for all?
Honestly, I'm absolutely shocking. So my youngest is 12, and getting into exams for entrance to schools. Honestly, I'm so useless. I've got a 2-1 degree in law, and I couldn't do any of their maths, couldn't do anything. But I did a bit of DIY at home. But the other thing is, the embarrassing thing is, my wife's kind of realised that I actually don't do very much. I look quite busy, and now I haven't got any events and don't go out and speak and stuff. I've sort of been, I've been caught out, really. She's like, "What do you do?" So the answer is not very much. I don't know about you, Paul. What do you do, by the way, these days? You work for somebody? You've got a 9-to-5 job?
Yeah. I work in debt finance. We're a brokerage for debt finance and commercial property. So that's slowed down a lot, but it's still ongoing. But it's like most industries, I think, is finding it kind of tough. And when you don't get to go out and meet people and that, it makes it all very, very difficult to really do business.
The good things for me, though, Alex, I've got 3 boys, and they, they're both in the academy, the 2 eldest ones, and then the youngest one's a good little rugby player. So we were training 2-3 times a week after school, at weekends. So we've been doing a lot of training, actually. So it's been quite good.
Scrum halves, Kyran?
They're all little scrum halves, yeah.
Are they really?
Yeah, if you look on the TV now, you look at sort of all these players that I played against, Entomac, Pinot, all of
Red
these
Path.
sort of,
Redpath,
absolutely. And I've said to my boys, listen, don't disappoint me. You can't disappoint me. You've got so you're right. The thing is, we may have to get an Irish passport for one of them, Paul. You see, because I was born in Ireland, and it's interesting now. The question is, Alex, do I apply for an Irish passport so my kids can get an Irish passport, so maybe they can choose? I don't know. That's interesting, but it's good to watch.
Did
these
you ever
young
consider
kids.
playing for Ireland?
Well, I had trials when I was 18, and I played for England schools, captain England schools, and people knew I was born in Ireland. My family are Irish, but I lived all my life in England, and so the idea of playing for Ireland, I wanted to play for England, but then Ireland did come along when I was 19 and said, come along for a trial at Irish Exiles. So I went to this trial, and I got knocked out in the trial, actually. And they said, I'll come back next year. But within a year, I was in the England squad and I was playing for England. There was never really that sort of choice like they do now, you play for England Day. There was never that choice for me. So, the option was there. So
I guess when you lost that schools Triple Crown final to us in 1990, Irish schools against English schools, Niffley Road.
Don't remind me.
That probably put paid to it.
Listen, my. Do you know what? My first game was against the All Blacks. We beat the All Blacks. It was amazing, and I thought playing for England, it's a doddle. And then I got into the Six Nations. First game, I think, or Five Nations. It was against Scotland, just eke to win. My next game was against Ireland. Now you can imagine that game for me. I'm obviously very nervous because all my relatives are in Ireland and half supporting me, but half not. But that was the longest game of my life. So it was my first time I'd lost in an England shirt. We lost. Simon Gagan scored in the corner. I had my shorts ripped off, completely ripped off when rucking was allowed. And I'm not joking you, the 80 minutes felt like 8 hours. It was horrible because I could hear my name being shouted in the opposite changing room before the match. And then when I was going out, we were in the tunnels, I was looking across and they were all staring at me and they were like, we owe you for choosing the wrong side. So honestly, it was awful. Peter Clohessy had a few choice words. The whole team did, and it was the most awful game of my life. I still shiver when I think about that match.
What I love is the fact that you two warlords have been to the very top of the game and won some of the biggest matches that there are to win. And while you're still talking about the under-20s, whatever it was, Triple Crown, nearly 30 years ago.
Yeah. Well, there was quite a few. There was Kieran and Mark Regan was there. Good people that you really want to rub it into. And Topley was there as well, Mark.
Yeah.
You had a good team, actually. Just not good enough.
Wally, what do you remember? What do you remember of your debut? Because I mean, Kieran talks about Peter Clohessy. You came through with a proper collection of Irish legends, and I just wonder whether your debut feels like yesterday or a different lifetime.
Different lifetime, I think. I think last year is another lifetime again. First cap World Cup in '95 against Japan, which was the Irish manager Pat Whelan had given me a nudge, going, if I scrummage very well in this game, I could be in for the decisive pool game against Wales. So 2 pushover tries, thought we had an absolute stormer. Came off the pitch, not a word said, of course. Not no word there. Gary Halpin, who very sadly passed away a few weeks back, real character of the game, a real top guy. Gary was there, and you're right that was the Nick Popplewell's Gary. The Neil Francis, and Paddy Johns, of course, who I think in that game you mentioned, Kieran, against you're against Ireland when you lost. I think didn't Paddy Johns come through one way to get you, Mick Galway the other way?
So Paddy,
each other out.
Yeah, so that's right. So the first thing Paddy John said when he came to Saracens, and I didn't know about this. Saracens signed him up, and there was a few Irishmen there who'd been signed up, and he came over to me, he goes, "You broke my nose," and I was like, "Paddy, I'm not a dangerous player. I'm not a puncher. I'm not a fighter. I'm a lover, not a fighter." And he said, "No, you broke my nose in the Ireland game." I said, "Paddy, I didn't break your nose. I never hit you." And he goes, "No, what happened was he went to punch me, right? And someone else went to come from the other side, and the other guy, I don't know which player, hit him in the head, and both of them got knocked out." So he still says, "I broke his nose." So that's very nice, isn't it?
Some big old characters. Can I just let's talk Ireland, England a bit, and I want to ask you about Lions as well. But just when was the last time the two of you had a pint? And when how do you reflect on both your days with Saracens? Wally, first of all.
I think last time we saw you, Kieran, was did we meet you in Trick? You were over speaking at one of the Irish events. I think the Irish Players Association dinner. But I might have bumped into you around Twickenham. I think since then.
Yeah,
but only briefly. Unfortunately, it's normally around games, and everyone's running one way and another direction, so you don't really get that sort of time. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a Saracens reunion since, I do remember one, maybe about 5 or 10 years after we finished playing, maybe around 2010. But that's too long ago. Yeah, because it's still good fun, WhatsApp groups and all that. Incredibly fond of the recollection of various times. The start of the professional era in 1996, and the squad that came together, and especially the legends like Michael Lyne and Philippe Sella walking into getting a chance to play with those guys, and also then the likes of Kyran and Hilly, Jippy, throughout that, and just as we went through, I was there 5 years when I broke my leg quite badly in Belfast playing against Ulster in a European Cup game, and decided that also at that stage it had turned to a stage where you wouldn't get picked if you were playing in England, so I had to go back to Leinster. But it was with a very heavy heart leaving there, albeit maybe the first few years, 95, 96, 97, were probably the better years, and then we sort of lost our way a little bit maybe for a year or two after that. But great times. And I thought the best part of it was the first year in particular, where you still had all the amateur, well, not all the amateurs, but a large amount of the amateurs from Saracens who might have been making the first team but were thereabouts, real characters, and brought the whole culture of the club, introduced the players that had come in, because there must have been, about 10 players, 10, 12 players maybe came in to bolster the ranks. So that we had a trip up to Stirling, up in Scotland, for about 2 or 3 days. I think, Brax, were you handcuffed to Tony Copsey and John Green? I think.
We're a family show. Nice. We are a family show at this point.
So it was that good old amateur ethos, but very professional as well. Eventually, after the first year or two, once we got, I think Francois Pienaar sorted out the structures and the infrastructure, because I think we were training under a little spotlight. It wasn't even full floodlights. Wasn't there a generator and a spotlight and playing murder ball within the dead ball line when the likes of Michael Lyne have been thrown into that? It was something to behold. But we went on, and then I suppose the highlight was winning the cup final against Wasp by 50 odd points in Twickenham. We should have won the league that year as well. I think we lost by a point to Newcastle. But yeah, some great days.
Kyran.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, I did 10 years at Saracens, and it was one of those times, in the era of going from amateur to professionalism, and it was very blurred lines, because, like you say, half the team were still amateur, still working in the city or having their jobs, and then the rest of us turned up having signed contracts. And effectively, in reality, all that happened was we ended up having sort of money to spend, and go out and drink and party and have a laugh. We still remained as amateurs probably for a few years. It took a while to mesh the amateurs and the professionals together. And we had a whale of a time, but the ethos and the going out and all of that was still there. It was great. We are on a WhatsApp group with all the alumni, and the times we had were just absolutely amazing. One of my favorite moments, Paul, you'll remember this, was after the Lions tour in '97. We came back. I know he's grinning about this, but he came back, and we were going along nicely. He had all these international players from around the world, and we signed some great players. But I remember we both went to with Richard Hill, I think Dip Rose as well. We went to Francois Payne and we said, look, we're having a reunion for the '97, so from the year before, to celebrate the success. Can we go out? Can we have permission to go to an event? And he said, you can go, but you have to be in training at, I think it was like 9 in the morning. Is that right? Something like that. So as you can imagine, we all went into town. Of course, Richard Hill, bedtime, 10 o'clock, he goes home. And so we had...
Yeah, just to correct you, Hilly had actually, I don't think we had clearance, but Hilly had gone to Francois and said, do you mind if I take the day off training tomorrow? We're going to this. But none of us were cute enough to do that. And we just went, should we go out and we'll turn up for training? But
well, maybe my recollection is slightly different, but Richard Hill was fine. But you and I ended up, so it took me, so the reason why we were late, it took me about an hour to get him out of bed. Well, first of all, to find him where he was in the hotel. He was in someone else's room, whatever. But he had a big night. I had a big night. But we were trying to get a tube home, and one of the tubes was closed. And then we went to another tube, and that was closed. Like, oh my God. So we got there late, and then straight away, Wally's thrown into scrummaging with alcohol on his breath, and the whole pack are all like, oh my God. Anyway, so Francois kicks off with us. He goes nuts at the end of the session in his room. And then Paul just goes, well, the reason why we couldn't make it was because there was a bomb scare at the tube station. And I'm thinking, oh my God. So straight away, do you remember? So
It was that inebriated from the night before that I didn't even come up with a decent excuse. Dog ate my homework.
You've gone big. It's big will go home, isn't it? It's not my dog ate my homework.
It kind of worked. But you know what? My time at Saracens was very special. I wouldn't trade it for any time in my rugby career. I mean, I feel like I missed the greatest years with Saracens because of how well they did since. I mean, Brendan Benter came in, created a really good culture. I kind of feel in our era, we I think the way we started out, we had some really good young players. We had sort of a great system going, and we tended to buy lots of players at the end of their career. And I think that all changed when Brendan Benter came in, and they sort of grew it from organically with the youth and obviously some stars as well, but they did it the right way. And I kind of, part of me is jealous of what they did. It was so special what they did since we retired, Paul, probably from Saracens, but it's been an amazing journey. Part of me thinks, wow, if we'd have just won in '97, maybe we could have kicked on and kept some of the team, but it wasn't to be, but very proud of being part of what was a special time. I wouldn't swap it for the world. It was great memories.
It's an amazing club to follow, and it's an amazing story, both from the era that you were talking about and the last few years as well. Do you still keep an eye, Wal, on Sarries? I mean, obviously the last few years of 18 months have been fairly turbulent, you would say, but everyone loves a comeback, and there is a hell of a comeback story to build from here.
Yeah, and there was things that were done, obviously, that have been well put out in the media, but I think what Saracens has done for English rugby, European rugby, and Lions rugby as well, I think is huge as well, and probably hasn't got the credit that it deserves when you think of the key players in that Saracens march over the last sort of 5 years, and how pivotal they are down in New Zealand with the Lions who are at the World Cup as well, with arguably the best performance in the last few years against New Zealand in the semi-final. So following Saracens certainly do. Just absolutely delighted to see them eventually get there and back it up consistently. Obviously, tough season for them this year. A poor start, but I do believe that they'll get back there, and the support in the club, I know, is still incredibly strong. a bit of belief. And I guess it's the story of good supporters, is it? When things are good and things are bad, you stick with the club. And I expect to see Saracens might be back to the Premiership straight away, but hopefully up there next year, and then in the following few years getting right back up again.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've answered that perfectly. Do just quickly want to say, I can't remember if I mentioned this at the start, we've got a little comments section off the right. So if you've got any questions you'd like to put to Wally or Kyran, please do pop them in there. We've had a couple already, and I'll come to those. Someone, Joe Monberg, suggested that you swim over for the England, Scotland, Wales Lions test. We'll get you some budgies and you can grease up and do that. And Trevor remembers very well your debut, Kyran. You got your ankle trampled by not just your backs, but by a certain Jamie Joseph. Do you look back on that now and think that made the day all the more special, or would you rather have been able to run around like most professional athletes, although you're amateur at that point, I suppose?
I mean, it was one of those days where we fluked the win against the All Blacks. I think Jeff Wilson, the winger, missed 3 or 4 kicks at goal. John Callard kicked his. It was just one of my ankle. I couldn't run around hardly, and everyone said, "Oh, you're so brave." Well, I wasn't brave. The only reason I didn't come off was because Matt Dawson was on the bench. There's just no way he was getting his first cap. I hobbled around. I refused to come off, but. No, they're great times. I mean, getting your first cap is massive. It's just amazing. You never think you're going to get there, and you get the chance, and then to win, and the crowd going absolutely mental against the best team in the world. It went downhill from there, really. I mean, everything went downhill from there. It didn't get that much better than that, really.
You had 2 good days. Stress. Well, the other thing, we'll come on to some of the questions that we've had pre-submitted. The one I always love asking your mob from 03 is, where is the medal nowadays?
Well, I lost it a few times. Bit embarrassing.
What?
Yeah, I lost it. I lost it. I had it in Charlie, my eldest's nappy drawer in 2003, and I lost it for 6 months. I couldn't find it. And then I found it, and then I went to an event. I lost it again, right? And then again, I've lost it 3 times. I got to a stage where this is ridiculous. I can't lose the medal. So safest thing is, I went to Nigel Ray. I said, "Oh, Nigel, I know you've got your museum at Saracens. Do you want to put my medal up somewhere?" And he went, "Oh, that'd be great." So it's up in the museum up in Saracens. So it's in a safekeeping because I just can't look after it.
Very sensible. Very sensible. Right. Let's get into some of the questions. And thank you to those who sent them in advance of tonight. We'll start with Finbar Cahill, who said, "What's your view about a home Lions tour? Personally, I'm not keen, but the options seem limited." Well, you're obviously, you're going to get the goggles on and paddle over. We understand, actually, there's a board meeting tomorrow, and that, I think, is where they're going to make a decision. So we should be hearing something next week. Kyran, you've been there, you've done it. You've done South Africa, obviously. Is it sacrilege to have a home tour, or is it about making the best of what we've got right now?
I think absolutely. Listen, the idea of not going on a tour. I mean, the magic about the Lions tour is the fact that these players come together and travel, and then 40,000 people come over. The Irish, the Welsh, they all come together, singing songs, and that is the magic of the Lions. But we're in COVID year, right? So we can't have the tour. So what's the next best thing? Well, it's definitely not to go to Australia and celebrate it there. Definitely not. So what can you do? I don't think it's fair to have it the year before the World Cup in case there's injuries, player burnout, because it's going to be a tough tour. So the next best thing has to be have it. I mean, the idea some people are saying is have it behind closed doors in South Africa, and I don't think that can work financially. So what a great opportunity to celebrate the Lions in the home countries with stadiums that will be full. Money can come into the game. It will be the biggest buzz. It will be amazing. It'll be absolutely amazing. You do lose the magic of the travel, but I think it's something worth sacrificing.
Interesting. Well, you were a star in '97, the star. Just before we ask your opinion on the tour that's to come, your recollections of '97. I mean, I think Delalio, back, he said they still talk about that as the most enjoyable thing they ever did, even above 03. Would you go along with '97 as just the peak, the Everest in more ways than one, so to speak?
Yeah, look, for me, highlight Ireland at that stage in the late 90s, we weren't very successful. We always seemed to beat Wales, but other than that, we were pretty poor against top opposition. So to go down there and play, which is the core of that 2003 England World Cup winning side as well, and some real great talent, and some of the great Welsh players of all time. Some of the great Scots in there as well. It was just fantastic. The culture in there was a bit like the Saracens. It was amateurs on a professional tour and trained professionally, but there was also a huge amateur ethos as well, enjoying each other's company off the pitch. And it was just fantastic how I don't think I've ever been in a setup where the guys that didn't make a certain team backed up the players that did. And I think that's the credit to that has to go to the leadership of Frank Houghton, the manager, and Geach and Jim Telfer, who were just outstanding. I think the manner in which we won it in the second test, where we were fairly much outplayed by South Africa, was a bloody mindedness and a team spirit that was second to none. And I just that ability to keep going and going and going, and belief, which I think is testament to the group and how we all got on together. But the Living with Lions video, obviously fairly well. I'm showing my age saying video. I'm I'd say the documentary was showed a lot of it, but there's even more to it. Yeah, more, and great fun on the trip as well. Real characters.
And when was the last time you cracked an ale with Ross Durant? Is that a thing? Because that was he was your opposite number, wasn't he?
He was, but funnily enough, we didn't socialise with the South Africans during that series at all. I bumped into him once in Dublin after a Barbarians game after I'd retired. I think it was Barbarians. He was over playing some invitational game, and had about a 10-minute discussion, and that was about it. So I haven't really changed jerseys afterwards. That's probably the only civil words we'd had over the whole course. But
you had him in your pocket. Perhaps he didn't take it well.
The jersey was down to my ankles. You could have. I tell you, never mind the goggles. I just stick that up on a mast and hop on a boat, and I'll get over there, sail across. He's a man monster, but a very good guy. And it was a pretty filthy series up front. Refereeing and TMOs and camera angles weren't quite what they are now. But myself and himself never really got stuck into each other, which was quite thankful on my part due to the size differential. He was a monster.
You had him where you wanted him. Just a quick question, really. I mean, do you see the home tour as the best of what we can do right now, or would you go for a deferral to next year?
What I would like to have seen done was to put the World Cup back a year, and then everything slide back a year, and then the Lions tour. I think the year that's in it, I do see, like what Kieran was saying, a year out, and that tour, which when England won the World Cup was so pivotal. It was the summer tour beforehand when they went to Australia and New Zealand, the success they had down there. And I think a lot of national coaches need their top players for that. So I do see it. It's not going to happen. Look, the Rugby World Cup is such a big thing. But I think it probably would have been better clarity around sponsorship as well if everything was another year past COVID. The second choice is, let's just play it in the UK. Even if Ireland can't host any games, it's still worth having. And if you can get half full crowds, that would be great as well. But it has to go. And it's a highlight for an awful lot of players. A lot of guys have had a lot of success but missed out on the line because they might have been injured for a year or whatever. It's a huge guys who've succeeded so well with their country club. It can be that bit that's missing, and a bit like an athlete with Olympic Games. If you've every 4 years, you get this one shot at it, and if it's just taken away, it's very tough when you've trained so hard and grown up on the Lions folklore.
Yeah. Good stuff. fingers crossed we get something to shout about and to shout about loudly this summer. I think everybody needs it, and it would be great to see all four come together and crack into the World Champions. Lots of other questions. So, Kieran, to you first of all, favourite moment of a Dublin Ireland v England clash? Any Dublin days or Dublin nights that stand out?
I mean, there was a Grand Slam decider, wasn't it, in 2003? That was in Dublin, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was a special night. 2003. Not just the game, but it was one of those games. I think we kept losing against one-off games against Scotland and Wales, and then that game was a crunch moment. I think that was the springboard really for the World Cup in 2003. It was really important that we won that and got the monkey off our back. You know, I think the last time we'd won a Grand Slam was 95, which I was involved in. We didn't win it since 95. So that was an important game, and it was also a great night. The thing is, with that in Ireland, you know, you go to some nations and you can go there and beat their national team, and the whole town and everyone's absolutely miserable, and you walk into a bar and they're like, oh, and they're howling abuse. You go to Ireland, it's the exact opposite. You know, they're like, well done, Jesus, you were great. You know, it's just the most welcoming country that you could ever imagine, win or lose. So if you're ever going to win a Grand Slam, it might as well be in Dublin, you know?
Yeah, good for a party. Well,
yeah,
any stand-up memories?
Yeah, on the pitch, I think early in the game, playing against Jason Leonard, he was just back from that neck injury, and Jason was carrying quite a bit of weight, and he got, jersey ripped to pieces off his back, and he was on all fours. And then, physio comes on with the magic sponge, and one of the lads from the crowd just looks in, and there he sees the belly hanging down, all fours, and he's heaving like that. And the lad shouts out from the crowd, "It's not a physio you need; it's a midwife, Leonard." And that sort of sense of humour in the Irish crowd, I must say, they are exceptionally quick-witted, especially in the old Lansdowne Road when you get you're that bit closer to the pitch. But we had great times, and you know what? After I never beat England at senior level, but we had great times afterwards. And one of the things I would say, people go on about the Celtic rivalry and that, but I think when it comes to rugby, the English players have a very similar culture. You get opposite number, whether it be Roundtree, Leonard, whoever it might be, Vickery, will just, come on, we'll go and have a pint together straight away afterwards, and then we'll go into the meal. And that's always been there right back from the days when Wales and Scotland didn't travel over during the Troubles and England did. It's a very, very close relationship.
No wonder you keep mentioning that win in the under-20s. I never realised you never beat England. Blimey hell, Paul. You're holding on
top
to
of the
CD. Under-20s. Seriously, mate.
Whatever you can. Richie beat you in 93. I think he got the winning pass to Gagan.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
So we've won, and Dave's won a few as well. I'm the only one in the family actually who hasn't.
Disappointing at Christmas lunch, that, isn't it? When you're showing your wares in that regard. How are your brothers, out of interest? How are Richie and David?
Very good, yeah. Richie's a pilot, although he's that's obviously not a great industry to be involved in right now, but he's still working away, doing a bit in that regard. And yeah, David's down in Limerick, still living down there, working with a property accreditation company, and he's enjoying life as well since
good.
And young families and all that, trying to get through COVID.
That is a proper Christmas lunch, isn't it? With 3 British and Irish Lions at the table.
Can you imagine being at their lunch though, and looking around the table? You might have played for the Lions, you might have played for Ireland loads of times, but you're still probably the worst player in the family. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's just that shocking. I'm not saying you.
I'm the third best. I have another brother, Henry, who didn't get capped. So I'm the third best in the family.
Poor Henry. He does the washing up.
Poor old Henry. The guys in the back of the bus used to have a song, poor old Henry, when they sang.
It's like the Barrett brothers, isn't it? The Broden Barrett brothers. Imagine being there. Imagine, have they got a fourth brother or something? They must be like, oh, what a loser. Bloody hell.
Yeah. Well, Scott Cornell always tells the story, doesn't he, about the fact that his uncle is Barry John and his godfather was Mervyn Davis, and he's like the 9th best player in his family once you factor in his father and his brothers. And anyway,
you talk about Christmas dinners there. I remember we used to always play on Boxing Day against Leicester. We had some of these. They were amazing games. That was that great Leicester team. They had Joe Stransky at 10, and we'd have line, and we'd win by a drop goal, or they would. But they got really, really feisty for about 2 or 3 years. We'd been clearly the 2 best teams, I think, in the league, and the ABC club. And I remember the first. You were always very cranky on Boxing Day because you're away from your families. You don't get to see them till that night or the following day. And I just remember the first time there was a big punch-up started, and Graham Roundtree just punched me straight in the throat. It was the most painful thing I ever got. And in fact, I think he intentionally meant it. So, but my voice box was sort of gone, and I basically couldn't speak for 3 days. So we flew back that night, and we had Christmas dinner on the 27th instead. And my parents and the rest of the family still say it's the greatest Christmas present they've ever got. It's me not being able to speak. There you go.
There's a little Graham Roundtree atop the Christmas tree in the Wallace household, dressed in a fairy dress. Yeah. Very good question here. Just and both of you, why don't you pick, let's say 3 or 4, but each of your respective countries guaranteed Lions starters in the test team. Kieran, who from the current England crop do you think gets a Lions starting jersey for the first test?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm going to say Maro Itoje.
Good.
I'm going to say Curry. And then I would say in the backs, I'm going to say, for me, Anthony Watson at the moment, he's on fire. But I can't see really Farrell or Ford or Youngs, or I mean maybe Slade if he was fit. No, I would just say 3 at the moment. I would just have 3. But if it was 4, if I had to pick a 4th, I think he'll probably end up going for Farrell. But I don't think he's quite on form. If you were to pick on form, not sure he'd get picked. But on history, he maybe get picked. But I can't pick any other players in the pack based on form.
Sinclair? Or you go Furlong over Sinclair?
I'd really listen. We're going to talk about England Ireland at some stage, but I'm interested though with the scrummaging. Paul will know better than me whether his scrummaging is up to it. I think he's a lovely player. He's got great hands. The question is, does Mako or Sinclair, are they good scrummagers? I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Well.
Yeah, I think they are is the answer to Kieran. I still think Mako, no secret that the Saracens players in England haven't been quite up to standard with lack of match practice coming into this. So it's hard to go on. And a lot of them are beginning to start hitting that form. I think Mako is one of those, But I'm here to probably talk about the English players. The Irish players. Furlong, I think he's really, the rest has done him the world of good. He was just about losing his Leinster place before he cried off with injury. Porter was a very useful player who may also go on the tour. But I think Tig, he seems to have got a lot leaner. His scrummaging's improved a bit as well, and he's just looking sharper around the pitch. So I think he's probably one. Do you know what? It's very hard to call the Irish players. There's not too many standout players. But Johnny Sexton, who hadn't played well for about years, just started to hit that sort of form again. And Johnny will probably, you'd pick him in your squad. And I think Gatti will keep a very open mind on form. There's a lot of rugby to be played between now and then, if there is a tour. But I think Sexton might have one last hurrah in it. I just, you got Finn Russell, who's exceptionally talented, and you got Farrell as well. I think would be the main other guys. And it could be a couple of bolters, guys that have come from nowhere, like Ty Byrne. He's been exceptional, and he's had to work so hard to break into the Irish team. And, he's having man of the match games time after time in both the second row and the back row. Now he might be seen a bit lightweight to play, in the second row against the likes of South Africa, but as a number 6 as well, he certainly has that ability, and he just seems to be getting better and better. And you might get someone like Henshaw, whose form has been exceptional. A year ago, I wouldn't have said he'd make the tour, but he's just every game, he's putting in performance and performance after that. A bit disappointed, a few guys like James Lowe, who's been dropped, and Stockdale, for that matter, who I think are very good attacking options, but their defence makes them too much of a liability, I think, at the moment, to get to the top of the game. But then that seems to be an issue with a lot of wingers as well. Watson has been caught, as an exceptional a runner he is, defensively he's been caught at times as well. So, it's a tough call, but I think it's going to be probably the most, nearly every time now we see a Lions tour, it's the most competitive one for places, that it's not going to be, well, they'll probably be the 15 and they'll be the other guys playing midweek. I think now it's literally down to form. If you're carrying a few knocks, you can't get your reps within the team, you won't make it. It's so tight between players now as the professional game keeps evolving.
It's a wonderful melting pot to have. I don't envy Warren Gatland in the decisions he's got to make, but it is going to be a lot of fun following it from the sidelines. Couple of others here. Charlie Hiscox, and actually obviously a former Saracens man. I can't remember if either of you would have been there with him, but Kieran, I'll ask you, Eddie Jones, general thoughts? ?
Pass. I don't know. I mean, listen, who can argue with his win ratio? Yeah, I mean, as a coach, comparatively to other coaches, he's been very successful. But I think England probably, when we talk about getting to a World Cup final, I think they were the sort of team who should be winning World Cups. Why didn't we win the World Cup? Lots of reasons. I think the fact is that two things. I don't really like the the way he tries to wind up the opposition, whoever it is, whether it's talking about Sexton and his head injuries and that sort of thing. I don't think there's any need for that sort of stuff. His jibes about opposition or about things to get some sort of advantage, which is a bit like the Mourinho type-esque coaching, where the whole world listens to him and hangs on every word, but everything's very scripted. I particularly enjoyed, like last week, his politics, the way he plays the politics and the press is amazing. So suddenly where England are really struggling and really not playing well under his direction, by the way, playing boring rugby, kicking everything. You've got Ferraris in the back three and you're not giving them the ball. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Playing a very, very unambitious game, but winning. But at the end of the day, other teams have caught up and overtaken, in my view, and suddenly we're scratching around, and he's actually supposed to be in charge of attack. So I find it very disappointing. Over the years, it grinds me, the things he says, and we all hang on every word. But last week, they had a terrible week. They played, before the French game, played awful. And suddenly, in all the press, everywhere, Wayne Barnes comes in to sort out the problem with England's discipline. And instead of focusing on his selections and the way they're playing, suddenly he's resolving it by getting it out in the press, all about getting Wayne Barnes in. So it's a brilliant political statement. Suddenly they're all, we're going to teach Owen Farrell to talk to rep. Anyway, so no one talked about selection last week, just talked about the Wayne Barnes thing. And it was brilliant, okay? Now, they have done something right this week. But the question is, could this England team, could they have better selection in players who are on better form? Yes. Does he stick with old players for years? Yes. Could he move players on? Could this team play better? In my opinion, yes. So, but he's too expensive to get rid of. So let's see if he can win the next World Cup. But I'll be honest with you, I'm not a massive fan. But that's, but his stats say differently, don't they?
Do wish you got off the fence sometimes. I mean, I was expecting a little tiptoe and then a pass, but very juicy. And were you at Saracens with him, or was that after your time?
Yeah, I was with him. Yeah, was he a good coach? I don't know really. We weren't that successful with him. He wrote a book, and afterwards he said, "Oh, me and Glenn Jackson argued about the way we play." I never recall any of that conversation. So he has his own opinions on people and rugby and whatever. So yeah, you know, maybe become, I don't know, Ireland's next coach after the World Cup.
Let's tiptoe on to the next question there. We'll leave that one there. It is. Okay, here's a sort of topical one. Well, I'll come to you. Should the English Premiership be ring-fenced? And I'm fascinated on your view of that, given your knowledge, expertise and understanding of what is currently the Pro 14 and will become the Pro 16.
I think if you want to invest in infrastructure and stadiums and that, you got to ring fence it. You know, it's my belief is if you've got that relegation holding over you, you're so desperate to win, you invest everything in the players as opposed to developing everything around the club. So I do think it's there was a very interesting article that came out of Brive as well. I can't remember the owner.
Oh yes, Simon.
And he was his theory was that it's being at the bottom when you're playing for relegation, you get big crowds. If you finish mid-table halfway through the season, the crowds don't turn up, the town doesn't get behind them. So I was straight on to Jeremy Davidson, our pal, who's head coach down there, saying, that's great, you can lose the next 4 or 5 and they'll love you. You start getting bigger crowds in the feed. I think you need to plan, you know, clubs shouldn't be just around, should be looking long term, and you need to invest. You want to keep growing the game. I think there's a bit to be said about pro rugby, Pro 14, should I say, in the way that there's an awful lot of dud games there at the bottom. And I suppose you got European qualification that some teams are playing for. But to invest and keep trying to push this on, I do think ring fencing is the right way to go. And I think one of the things for somewhere like England is it's more getting different regions to have a team as well is probably a big thing, and not having them all. And obviously the Southwest now has got quite a lot going on, and up north, there's still sort of gaps in the country that would be good to have a franchise there. I know the likes of Wasp moving up to the Midlands, where this rugby is very big, is obviously another plus. But I think it's sort of getting there where the teams are quite well spread out and the catchment areas. So I would say once you do that, there should be a certain number in. And the thing is, if you probably only have 1 or 2 teams that have the ambition to actually go up to the Premiership fully, others with the outlay that you'd have to go rather than going up and parachuting back down again. Maybe only a few clubs have that ambition. So, what structure do you have? Are you going to play 12, 14 teams? You put them into 2 pools of 6 or 8, and then you lose supporters with regards to trying to follow it. Like trying to follow the Pro 14 at the moment is, till it gets to the knockout stages, it's just too complex. Are they in our group? They're not in our group. What happens if we win this game? It's not as important as a game that is in our pool. And it's quite complex. I did enjoy the old league system, albeit we probably lost the league that year to Newcastle, but that one where just every game counts. But with the amount of international players the big teams have missing and the amount of games they play now, that's very disadvantageous for them as well.
Yeah. That's obviously one of the hot topics. Quick question here, Kieran. I don't know if you saw it in the sidebar from Neezy, who says, what's your opinion on concussion? I remember talking to Kieran about a time when he had taken a knock at a game, a team called the Move Castle, and Kieran had no idea what it was.
I don't know. I can't remember that from Neezy.
Still doesn't. Obviously, the effects linger. But I mean, concussion is a big fat topic right now, and we're probably going to hear a lot more about it. I signed the letter along with Paul Wallace about progressive rugby. I don't know whether you saw that. That was sent to World Rugby. Oh yes,
about changes that we wanted to make in the game, which I think are important. But I'm speaking on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, to Parliament.
Wow.
Yeah, because of the investigation about heading the ball in football, and they want to sort of talk to lots of different sports about head injuries and concussions. I mean, I got concussed quite a lot when I was playing, and I am one of those players very worried about my memory. And I got knocked out and concussed and played the next day, and all the things that you shouldn't do. So post career, you look back and I mean, it really was like the Wild West. It wasn't managed at all. You got concussed, you don't come off the pitch. If you get knocked out, you do not come off the pitch. That was the mantra, and Paul was probably in the same position. You know, throughout from going from amateur to professional, it was like that. You know, to actually, it'd be very embarrassing, you know, to come off the pitch with a head injury, because players think, you know, you're not up for the fight, you're faking it, and even if you have been knocked out or whatever, you think you dust yourself off, you just carry on. So it was really dangerous game we were playing. But I do think, you know, we've reached a pivotal time where I think we've got to learn more about, you know, the problem really. I do think nowadays it's much better dealt with the HIAs, and you have to pass tests, and talking about saliva tests. But 99% of rugby is played not professionally, it's played in the amateur game. You don't have pitchside doctors, you just don't know. And we've just got to, I think we've got to explore how the game can be played by reducing head injuries and matches. And it can be done, it really can be done. And I think it will be done over time. But I just feel that the rugby game, especially, you know, the powers that be, World Rugby, I think they're very reactive as opposed to being proactive, you know. And if you look at the NFL and how they've, you know, learned from the legal case against them, is now they have protocols in all the universities and all the schools and everything. You know, you can only train a certain amount in the week, you can only do this, and that's a reaction from the massive legal case worth £1 billion, right? So I think it's about time we became very, very reactive, not, you know, proactive, as opposed to reactive to what's happening, ex-players suing them. So yeah, I think there is a problem. I still think we can't get away. We don't want to be like cancel culture, because rugby is an evasion game with collisions in it, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? So we don't want to get to that where it's all tag rugby, because then you would have probably played for England, Alex, you know? So
no, not even at that level, unfortunately.
Not even at that level. But
always been on the touchline with some lavender.
I hate the idea of thinking that I'm trying to cancel the game of rugby and the collisions, but we've got to look after people, you know. I think it's about time we did that.
And definitely so all of us. Good luck on Tuesday. That'll be really interesting. I hope that gets a bit of pickup. I'm sure it will do. Conscious of time, I've really enjoyed just nattering, and I hope everyone, certainly NBN clients and Sarries fans, have enjoyed a walk down memory lane with 12 warlords of Saracens. But let's finish with a flourish and a little look ahead to the weekend. The winner will be, and why? Wally.
I'm going to go with England, as much as I hate to do it.
Hell has frozen over.
Yeah, I think it's going to be incredibly tight. It's one I could have probably said Ireland and got myself to believe it, but I just think England are getting that momentum going. You know, the main issues like their discipline, I think, is come back a bit. I'm still not convinced of Ford and Farrell as a 10-12, maybe Farrell in a 10 when you're playing against the big international sides, which Ireland are just about clinging on to at the moment. I think we've lost a bit of physicality. The sort of James Ryan and Connors, who's at 7. I just thought if he was playing, I think he would have been the sort of guy who's tackling. He's got this perfect chop tackle and gets his arms out and gets around all perfectly legally. And he would have done such a big job on the Vunipolas. I think he's just going to be a big loss. I think we just might be slightly overpowered. There's not much in it. I think if Sexton plays well, as we saw against Scotland, I thought Ireland played a lot better than the 3-point win against Scotland. Some of our defence was very poor, and obviously out wide, James Lowe in particular has paid the price for that. But then again, you know, you bring in Stockdale, who isn't noted either for that. I think if England get a couple of opportunities, I just think Watson and May are just electric out there. If Ireland can maybe take a bit of the tempo out, and maybe that's why Conor Murray's in, really attack the line out. Our line out defence is probably the best in the world at the moment. Paul O'Connell's had a huge impact on that. And then really attack the midfield, where we probably have a bit more power in Aki and Henshaw. We could certainly win the game. But if I just have an inkling that England are just on that, you know, that win against France was huge, albeit I still think France is the best team in the championship. But I think that confidence that they've got with that, they'll just have enough. But it's a flick of a coin, this one.
Going to be great. Talking of Starries, Daly at 13, Kieran, his preferred position. I think only the second time he's played there. So fascinating to see how he goes. Have England got Ireland's number at the moment, or are you still a bit worried about one or two creaks in the armour?
Well, I mean, listen, I think the game against France was wonderful. I mean, it made me feel that, there's plenty of fight in that team. There's plenty of talent in that team. You can see if they, up against it, they can play. England can play. The question is will England, and I don't know, we'll find out on the weekend, will England go back to type and try to kick everything and squeeze Ireland? I think England have beaten Ireland last 4 occasions. Is that right, Paul? I think they've won the last 4. I mean, this is a massive game for both coaches. I mean, God, Andy Farrell needs this win. So he desperately needs this win, doesn't he? But so does Eddie Jones. The thing is, did I see enough in the England game, that win against France, to mean that they can go over to Ireland and win? I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I do think it will depend on the strategy and how they try to play it. Now, in the past, England have beaten Ireland by, I guess, beating them up front, really, strangling them up front and basically kicking them into the corners and making life very difficult. I think Paul O'Connell's made a massive difference. I think they've stole more than anyone else. I think they got 8 steals. England have got the best line out in the championship at the moment at 93%. So it'll be interesting to see if they can disrupt them. But I do think losing Ryan is massive. But to see Daly, I think, in his preferred position, I really want to see it. I think one of the areas I would be concerned for England is I don't have massive confidence in our back 3 under the high ball. Okay, so I think Max Malins against France didn't look like he was going to catch much. He gave away a couple of penalties. He's a great outfield player, but under the high ball, I'm not so sure. Daly the same, and Watson. And with Gaelic football, the Irish are the best at it. So if Sexton's on form and they can get the ball in the air and get a couple of early penalties, maybe Paul O'Connell can get parity up front. If that happens, it's going to be very tight. If I was a betting man, I would say England by 1, but don't be surprised if Paul O'Connell comes through with his pack and ended up getting a couple of steals in the air from high balls from Sexton.
Edgy and cagey. I did not think we'd have a unanimous decision, but only just. Where would we be watching? Well, on the sofa with a cold one, or there are many options, I suppose.
On the sofa, yeah. So was it 4:45 kickoff?
Something like that,
just before bedtime.
Over here.
Yeah, get a beer inside.
I might have to flick in between Peppa Pig and half time.
Kieran, where are you going to be?
Oh, I'll be at home. I'll be having a beer, having a pint of Guinness. St. Paddy's Day just now, so I'm looking forward to the battle.
It's going to be great. Gents, it's been really lovely to hear your thoughts and to see you two catch up. And it's been lovely to wander down memory lane with you as well. So thank you very much to both of you for your time. So it's been really, really lovely to see you both looking so well and to, as I say, reminisce on some great days in your career. We will leave it there for now. Before we do go, I do just want to say, thank you to Wally and to Kieran for giving up their time this evening. It's been lovely, as we say, to catch up with them. And just remind you, if you haven't already, in the comments section, if you scroll back up to the top, there is a link there which will tell you more about the Digital Divide campaign. Please do have a look at that. And if you have got a couple of quid down the back of the sofa and you've enjoyed this evening, we'd love you to donate. And if you've got a couple of devices that aren't doing much else, once again, we'd love you to pop those into the pot, and we will hopefully make a bit of a difference to some children who really need it. And that, I hope, will be a very good outcome for this evening. We do hope to see you at a physical, would you believe it, NBN event sooner rather than later as the restrictions are lifted. Keep an eye out on NBN socials and the website for upcoming events. But as rugby fans, definitely keep an eye out for the NBN post-tour Raw event in October. Hopefully, we will be roaring very loudly about a Lions series win. Wally, lovely to catch up. Look after yourself. Kieran, good luck to the mini Brackens as well. We'll see them in Sarri shirts before too long. To everyone else, enjoy the rest of your week. Have a wonderful weekend. And may the best team win. All the best to you. Thanks.
Enjoy. Bye.